next week, I guess. And
Yeah,
for one, am not happy.
I know. You've been able to satisfactorily do your job at home, not having to wear pants, and now they are forcing this horrible scenario on you. It's terrible.
It is. It's scandalous. Yeah, I would refute the accusation I don't wear pants. I mean, I am on a lot of video calls. That's a dangerous move for.
You could do the newscaster thing.
I could, but every now and then, like this morning, I was on a video call and I had my back door open, and then someone next door decided to go nuts with a whippersnipper and a leaf blower and a chainsaw for about 40 minutes.
Oh, geez.
And so I had to get up mid-call and close the door because I couldn't hear anything. And I'm like, that would have been very difficult to do. Sans, trousers. But, I'm happy with, as the Americans would call them, sweatpants.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, I guess life had to go back to something resembling normality.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I got to go to an actual football game last weekend. An actual football game with real actual people in the vicinity of each other, and it was a delicious slice of normality.
Now, we've obviously discussed, because we've had the opportunity to go to COVID-safe cinemas for a little while now, and both you and I really do enjoy the fact that there's no one sitting directly next to us because of safety distances and all that stuff. We really love that. When you went back to the footy, obviously this was at the MCG, where they can have close to 50,000 people, and they had
close to seat 100 normally, so it was at 50% capacity. So 50K.
Yeah. So did you like that number, or does the footy, that live event, do you feel like it needs to really feel like, does it need that energy of the full audience kind of thing?
It wasn't a very interesting game between uninteresting clubs. So I didn't, and plus also had been the first time in well over a year since I've been able to go to a live game of football. But I didn't feel the absence, and there were only 21,000 there because it involved a team from Perth and Melbourne Football Club, whose supporters were probably busy, up in the Alps, skiing or doing something else that rich people do, maybe yachting. It was a lovely southeasterly breeze on Saturday afternoon. And they don't turn up because they suck. But it was just nice, even with only 20,000 in there here, to just be in amongst that atmosphere again. So if you love the game, or if you're a fan of American football or soccer or whatever sport you are, being in that live environment is really a fantastic sort of part of the experience. That vibe of people getting up and getting really pissed off and yelling at the umpire and storming off and just losing their shit about stuff that they shouldn't lose their shit about. That was good, and that was all there with 21,000 people. Now, coming this Friday night is a bigger game between clubs who do suck this year but have a traditional rivalry that Collingwood and Carlton, they hate each other. So they've bumped up that to 75% now. So that means 75,000 people could technically be there. I would doubt there will be that many there on Friday night. But to see a game like that with, that kind of emotion on the line with only 20,000 odd people there would have been, that would be less exciting. But it sounds like we're on track to move back to, something resembling
so far, I wonder if part of this is because of the footy coming back. I noticed in the shopping centres that there were a lot more people getting angry at people wearing masks. And it was sort of like, well, it's all right to go to the footy, but we can't go around the shops. And a lot of that mentality was very front and centre. And I also wonder if having Dan Andrews, bedbound for a while, and a new acting PM come in and sort of like, let's relax that a little bit more. I wonder if that's got anything to do with it.
But the idea that someone's getting pissy at someone in a shopping centre because the other person is wearing a mask, and you are no longer being compelled to wear a mask inside a shopping centre. You need to go to the supermarket as of Friday night, without wearing a mask. That'd be the first time in a long time you haven't had to wear a mask at the supermarket. So I can't understand that in any way, shape, or form about what the thought process is.
Well, clearly, Travis, you just don't understand. It is offensive and insulting to my personal beliefs and religions when someone else wears a mask and I don't want to. They're insulting me.
It says something about the person who's actually calling somebody else out for being a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
But I like my masks. My masks are cool. And I've barely had a chance to wear them over the last few months. So I am, if you go to Japan or a lot of places in Southeast Asia, Japan in particular,
it's pretty standard.
Yeah. It's standard. And I remember the first time I went there, I was like, this can't work, can it? This can't work. And then you Google it, you're like, oh, actually, it does really kind of help. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even about, initially I think I interpreted it as a fact of like, if it's just people who are, really paranoid about catching public transport around other people. But no, it's the opposite. It's, I don't want to make other people sick. It's a sign of courteousness to their fellow travelers and their fellow citizens that they don't want to get everybody sick. So they all wear masks so they're not making other people sick. And, I guess it says something about our society that, we are still on the downward slope, but in it, no less, of a giant pandemic. And we have people here who are getting pissy at other people wearing a mask. It's just insanity. But you're right. I'm seeing a comment around a lot now. Oh, I can go to a footy and blah, blah, blah. But I can't go to a bar, or I can't go to a dance club, or I can't.
Well, let's be honest. Everyone wants to see you on the dance floor.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's coming, I'm sure. Should we talk about? We've actually got a very full show this week, so
we do. Yeah, we teased it a little bit the week before last because of when we record versus when things get released. We now have the world has experienced Zack Snyder's Justice League and the first episode of Marvel's new show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, has dropped. We've got episode 2 coming in a couple of days. And on top of that, the creme de la creme of our show, it is the chain movie. And Travis had us go back in time, possibly further than we have ever been, to 1967, where we watched The Night of the Generals. So we've got those 3 things to talk about. We may possibly not get to Falcon and the Winter Soldier tonight if we go long on Justice League, because it's a long movie, a lot of stuff to digest. But if we do miss it, we'll have a much more bumper episode for episodes 1 and 2 next week, ladies and gentlemen. Incidentally, hello to all the new people who are watching along.
Yes, it was a few people there. It's weird. Why are you here? We're welcome, but why are you here? Should we start with the one that everybody has been waiting for weeks and months and years for us to talk about, the most anticipated thing going on in the world of entertainment right now, and that, of course, is the 1967 film Night of the Generals.
Absolutely, it is now come. It is bearing fruit now, better than ever before.
That'll keep people happy.
Yeah.
Experience is definitely one way to describe watching 4 hours of Justice League. I suspect you might have something interesting to say about that.
Yep.
So we followed the late, great, what's his name?
Christopher Plummer.
Sorry. I did cheat a little bit because we followed him earlier in the late last year, earlier this year into the
Inside Man,
the Spike Lee film, but I forgot. And so I can't get that time back. That's 2 people who seem like they're voting against it right now. But
some people are just wrong. But anyway,
Christopher Plummer passed away in February, so
yes.
I thought it would be appropriate to follow him again and give him the send-off he deserves. And we do tend to focus on stuff from the last 25 years or so a lot on the show.
Makes sense, really, but
to jump back in time to something that's a little bit one film I haven't seen, I'm not familiar with, and a very different era of filmmaking.
Absolutely right. It was watching this movie. It feels like the old way of making movies. Everything about it, the way that everything is set, the way that all of the characters are positioned. It's more like a filmed stage play rather than a dramatic thriller set in the middle of a war. But for those who don't know, let's try
really.
and keep this going. So, Night of the Generals is set in it starts off in 1942. A Polish prostitute and a German agent, they're one and the same, is murdered in Warsaw. Suspicion falls on 3 generals: the Major Grau, played by Omar Sharif, of German intelligence, seeks justice, which ends up taking decades. That's it's one hell of a cast. It's some of golden age cinema royalty with Omar Sharif, Peter O'Toole. You've got Donald Pleasant in there. You've got Charles Gray, Philippe Noriette. It's
so Tom Courtenay, who, while not a household name today, you don't get knighted for being an actor for everything. And he was nominated for 2 Oscars back in the day. So, just that sort of that core of O'Toole, Sharif, Donald Pleasance, and then a cameo, Professor Plummer. Really, you can add it really that the golden age of cinema, some of the biggest names going around. And I think it's very, very generous of you to go for people who don't know what the plot of this film is. Like, that would be pretty much everyone.
Because this movie, I was reading, it didn't make money at the box office. This was even when it finally came out. This was after Peter O'Toole and Omar Sharif had been in Lawrence of Arabia and become big stars. They were bound contractually to this, much like Ed Norton had to do the Incredible Hulk, the Italian Job remake. But this movie was not a success at the box office, and it's kind of interesting to look at it and go, oh yeah, so they've always been these big name led movies that can just bomb. It's not a new generation thing. It's something that is
star power doesn't always get you over the line, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
the thing I noticed about this film was watching it. It is a 2.5-hour film, so this is not short.
No, it is not.
Probably didn't help. Was interestingly that it kind of reminded me from a technical perspective of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because obviously that was obviously, but if you've seen the film, it's Tarantino paying homage to the cinema that he loved from the late 60s. And this is a film from the late 60s. So everything about it kind of, as you sort of said, that the way it's shot, the way the scenes play out, but also just, I guess, the meandering pace that the film goes at. Sort of, it's very languid.
It's not very well laid out either, because there's 3 different decades that it goes through. There's the late 40s, where this murder of the prostitute and German agent happens. Then there's 10 years later, and then there's 10 years later after the war. And it's like, okay, you're not very well explaining that, and you just jump from one to the next in a bit of it's that style of
it sort of dissolves from time period to time period. Like, it doesn't actually have any text on screen or an establishing shot to sort of let you know that we're now in a different time period somehow.
Absolutely right. I feel like it's kind of, this is one of the earliest examples of that time jumping narrative that I've ever watched. And it's like, I wonder if this was one of the more progenitors of that style, because it is very popular, particularly in the last 10-15 years, to jump backwards and forwards when telling a story and have these revelations and explanations go hand in hand as juxtaposition.
We're bringing our third co-host, Archimedes, has joined the fray. We'll be interested to hear what he thinks of Justice League a little later. You're right; it is a little hard to follow in parts exactly where you are in the story. You really kind of do need to be paying attention to what's going on to really follow exactly how the story is progressing, because it jumps back and forward very liberally, and doesn't really spend a lot of time or effort in trying to make sure it's taking you along with the journey.
And especially, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, as a historian, which I can very pretentiously call myself because I do have a degree in history, and as a bit of an aficionado of World War II history, I had some problems initially with the setup of this film, the premise of this film. Do you realize how much of a shit the Nazis would have given about a Polish prostitute being murdered in 1942? They wouldn't have given a single squirt of piss about. They couldn't have given less of a flying fuck if a German prostitute died. Now, the fact that she was a German agent, maybe it might have put a blip on the radar, but would it have caused a German intelligence agent to actually bother a fucking general? To actually go and like interrogate generals and try and find out and get to the bottom of his crime? Like, no fucking way, not for a second would they have ever gone down that road.
Yeah, straight off the bat, you are expected to just divorce from all expectations and presentations of Nazi Germany during that time more than any other. And there's not even any real explanation or tying that to the character of Major Grau as he comes in. He seems to be he's got this permanent smile on his face, and as he comes in, and we're told that this prostitute was stabbed over 100 times, and it's like, okay, that's brutal. This is interesting, but what really?
It's actually an interesting premise. It's basically a serial killer film set in World War II.
Yeah.
And that's actually, and it's all the way through this film, I'm thinking, this film is like, add this to the list next to Monster Squad that desperately needs a remake. Because this story or a story with the same premise could do great things.
Absolutely.
But I'm not saying this film is bad. It's actually not. It has its pros and cons. Yeah. That was just sort of, maybe some people could jump on board and go, oh, well, the Nazis, well, they were a law-abiding folk, right? They respected the rule of law. So, they're not going to be going around randomly murdering people. They weren't monsters. So I don't know if that instant, like the initial premise that a Nazi policeman of some description would bother investigating that crime in any way thoroughly was instantly suspicious to me, and then that just kept growing through the film. The other part that kind of had me going, how does this work? Is Omar Sharif is famously Egyptian.
Yes.
And a wonderful actor, and a sex symbol of his age, but he's quite obviously not white.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And again, I'm not trying to be racist here. I'm just like, the guy's quite obviously olive skinned. He's obviously swarthy, and he comes from North Africa. That's where he's from. And I was just trying to think of a scenario where someone like that, with that appearance, would somehow work his way up to a major or be anywhere employed in an official role by the Nazis. I mean, I know they weren't adverse in some ways to putting people on the battlefield. And sorry if I'm getting way too technical for people who are watching about my Nazi history. But they weren't adverse to putting on the battlefield as used cannon fodder, right? They used Arab troops and stuff like that. And
of course,
there were SS divisions from other countries, but generally speaking, they were kind of white parts of other countries, So I was a little bit like, I'm not sure about how exactly Omar Sharif is supposed to fit into that role.
There's elements of it that come through when you at that big gala dinner, the first time that the three suspected generals kind of meet, and they do have this loose mention of Omar Sharif's character, and it's kind of going, oh, he's a bit of an odd one, and it's like, okay, you need to kind of play that up a little bit more to kind of explain it. So like maybe present him more as this extraordinary talent, that he is able to rise above the typical Nazi regime bullshit to get to a position where he was able to walk into one of the highest society, highest official places. And it's like, that ain't really likely to have happened.
So I guess historical accuracy, interesting, because it was only 22 years after the end of a war.
Yeah.
When it was made, and there would have been very regularly people attending the cinema and the film. We were there, right? They experienced the end of a war, or their relatives and family and friends have experienced the end of a war and experienced the Nazis. So that was just a little bit difficult for me to swallow. But just the general premise of a film, and I feel like I'm being a racist. I'm really trying not to be. I'm just sort of trying to think. The Nazis were, famously, you might not have been aware of this, but they were a little bit racist.
Fake news.
They might have had some photos taken of them in college in blackface. So the idea of someone of color having such a prominent role and being allowed to basically, as we would say in Australia, shirt front generals at their homes to go, hey, where were you on a night of blah blah blah? Yeah, quiet, and that kind of bothered me all the way through his character arc.
Yeah,
he shouldn't be doing this. He would know better than this if he got to this level, and he would never have got to this level, being who he is.
Yeah.
I want to get some positive stuff.
Yeah,
Peter O'Toole's incredible in this.
All three of the generals play their characters really well, in spite of, aside from Peter O'Toole's character, which gets a bit more TLC on that character development and kind of background storytelling. They all just have these characters really, really played out well. Like Donald Pleasant's General Kahlenberg, he is kind of, they mention that he's like one of the nicest and the friendliest of the generals, and he does always come across as more of a mild-mannered, meeker kind of character, but he's weaselly. And as you kind of go through the decades seeing him and sort of like what he's involved in, it's sort of like he did really well with that. And I was particularly impressed with Charles Gray, General von Seidelglabel. I think I'm butchering that name, obviously.
German isn't great. Yeah.
And he is, again, this guy that's sort of like, every time you see him, he's kind of playing all sides and happily determined to, he even says that he wants to be a neutral party and all of this. And it's like, he is so untrustworthy. You could not throw him anywhere. And
he is slimy, isn't he?
Yeah. But then Peter O'Toole,
his character,
he's a fucking block of stone, and it's fucking chilling. It's old school. Like, think about the way that they presented Norman Bates in Psycho and things like that. The really kind of devoid of emotion character, very staring just off of center of camera and things like that. He's doing a lot of that, but it's sort of like, okay, this guy is fucked up. Like the scene where he goes and sees the self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh, and just the sweat that's building up on his face and just the slight shaking as just it affects him in a way. And it's like, this guy fucked up. Oh,
he looks like a Nazi, right? He's Nazi poster boy, right? He blonde hair, blue eyed. And in a way, I kind of found myself going, I wonder if someone like Ray Fiennes looked at this performance when he was creating his character in Schindler's List. Very different, but I can sort of see a line between the two. The other part of this film, which is really, I was surprised, given the title, was given very short shrift, was the actual Night of the Generals. It's there, but it's given a real, like, it's happened,
It's like, this is inciting incident. Cut to 10 years later.
Yeah, pretty much. It sort of happens and it's over. For those who don't know what the Night of the Generals it's basically the plot of the entire 2008 Tom Cruise film, Valkyrie.
Yes.
Where a bunch of generals towards the end of a war tried to assassinate Hitler in an effort to then basically stage a military coup and then try and make a separate peace with the Allies. So, and then, but it didn't work, funnily enough. So
I remember it happening. I remember that being
It was a
how
good
it
effort. It was a good effort, but look at that damn table. But it's there, and a number of our generals in this story are actually members of that plot. And you sort of mentioned it in that Charles Gray's character, kind of like, well, let's just say I'm going to be on the fence about the whole thing, and I'm not going to commit, or very cowardly. But again, the consequences are it's over. Like pretty much everyone who was involved in that plot was fucking hung or shot or brutally killed. Like, and the idea of it, 2 or 3 of them, they pretty much all of them survive the war. In the generals, at least. So it was interesting that is the name of a film, yet is covered very little in the film. And again, though, I found myself thinking, this would actually make Valkyrie was a bit meh.
Yeah.
And this was actually the idea of actually putting this whole serial killer angle over the top of the intrigue of the Night of the Generals would again be able to make a fascinating story to remake today with better production values and better, not better actors necessarily, but maybe a tighter script.
I think that's part of it. There's even trying to divorce from the fact that it's over 50 years old of a movie, and like, oh, they don't make movies like that anymore. It's still, you're kind of looking at it going, oh yeah, I'm really feeling that 2.5 hours time, and it's not as chilling and harrowing as it should be. It's like the sequence where General Tanz is going through and basically just slowly but surely destroying Warsaw, just as an exercise. And so, like, that should be way more harrowing and horrible, because that is awful, unequivocally awful, and happened. Those things happened, and you don't really see much of it. You just see a lot of pageantry around it, and it's played as if it's very kind of borderline offensive to Major Grau, because he gives up waiting to talk to the general and just turns off and leaves. And he's a madman. He's just burning the city. And it's like, yeah.
I think the reason for that is, if you're reading the trivia on IMDb, this film was one of the last to run into heavy censorship trouble before the abolition of a production code administration and its replacement with the current system, the MPAA. And maybe even without that, but like, I mean, if you look at a film like Schindler's List, where if you think of the scene where they liquidate the ghetto, the film's not backwards about coming forwards, seeing people get shot in the head and horrible things happening.
Yeah.
I would hope that it depends. Like, they would quite easily do the same thing. There seems to be people are getting shot in the street, and it's pretty bland. Shot, there's no blood, or as you sort of say, there's not a whole lot of consequence to what they're doing to these people. I felt like that robbed the film of quite a bit of power in the sense, right? It's sort of, if you think about that scene in the liquidation of a ghetto, it's harrowing.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar kind of scene here in a way.
Yeah.
It's blowing up like with tanks and flamethrowers, entire neighborhood blocks, and they're just like, it's almost an administrative exercise,
Yeah. So like, I've got to do my numbers.
Interesting an angle about this is that I sort of came to during the film is it focused on sex crimes, and I guess sex as a thing, like not a common angle you would see a film in the 1960s take, right? Still a fairly conservative era, especially Hollywood. So the fact that she was a prostitute, and they were talking about, there are lots of stab wounds around her genitals and stuff, and you were like, what am I watching? Like, CSI Warsaw, Law and Order, that's for you kind of thing, right? Like, it was, have you dusted for semen?
Oh, it's all goopy.
So that was, it's quite a, well, I wouldn't say racy, but it's
for its time, it's pretty damn racy. I mean, there's like the boom of the 70s hadn't happened yet, and this was, very openly displaying and having as part of the story the prostitute career, so to speak. You know, one is dead at the start, and then there's the couple of scenes with General Tance and the other prostitute he picks up in a Parisian bar, and it's like, okay, this is creepy. If I was that prostitute, I would not get in that car with General Tance because he fucking weird.
Serial killer vibes.
Yeah, very, very much so. I feel like this movie, kind of like what we're going to talk about next with Zack Snyder's Justice League, in spite of it being 2.5 hours long, I feel like there's actually enough interesting elements that if they spent more time, turned it into a miniseries or a single season story that went deeper into the serial killer in occupied Warsaw and leading up to the death of, or the end of the war, so to speak. That would be fucking cool if they were able to just go into more of Omar Sharif's character's kind of reasons why he gets obsessed with it.
A Nazi Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, that would be kind of fucking cool.
That leads into an interesting art angle. I felt like a lot of Nazis in this film were treated quite sympathetically.
Yeah.
Like Major Grau is a very decent human being.
Yeah, his conversations with Inspector Morand of the French police, they were great scenes, by the way. And he is very much played as like, I'm literally just following the letter of the law, so don't think of me too badly, even though I am very much a Nazi. It's like I'm just following orders, and he's kind of given a bit of a mulligan for that. It's
and
weird.
Even Donald Pleasence's character is very disapproving of what Peter O'Toole's character is doing.
Yeah,
in his liquidation of Warsaw and destroying neighborhoods, and he's like, it's very tutting about he doesn't seem to care for his methods. He's going to kill all these people who are innocent people. And that was interesting in the sense, like maybe, look, it's very rare to have any character be sympathetic, any Nazi military character be sympathetic in the film. Like Oscar Schindler was fairly sympathetic. Wasn't a soldier vote. He was a businessman and opportunist, but very rare for a Wehrmacht soldier to come across as not a complete monster, let alone 2 or 3 of them in this film who are kind of played that way as just being sort of bystanders of history. That was interesting to me. It's like I don't think you would see that today.
And even with Peter O'Toole's General Tance, there's an element of sympathy to him at the beginning, at the very least, because he's riding through the streets and he stops and has this conversation with the Polish kids, and he just he seems genuinely offended that the children are in such dire states, and he's like does a token Nazi nice thing, sort of like, yes, make sure that everyone is walking around with sweets and things for the children, and it's sort of like, okay, he's not out and out horrible. He's not just your quintessential, this is the bad guy and there are no redeeming qualities to him. And the way that you slowly peel away some of the psychoses of his character, you start thinking, okay, this guy, there's elements where talking about him being a war hero for is it Kazakhstan or something like that? I can't remember now. I don't know. But
the hero of Leningrad.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. And you kind of think, okay, he's suffering from kind of shell shock and PTSD. Okay, that's just explaining that kind of explains why he's acting the way he is. Oh no, he's not. He's just fucked up. Okay. It was an interesting way of doing a little bit of a red herring for that character, especially when Omar Sharif, there's a point where he's kind of talking about the likelihood of each of the 3 generals being the murderer. And he says that he doesn't think it's General Tance. But obviously that gets, spoilers, it's General Tance.
But while we're talking spoilers, I guess I mean, I don't want to rush you, but I think we've got a full show. We got a full show.
Yes.
I want to tie a bow around this and just say the end of this film is fucking terrible and absolutely needs to be fixed. Like it was just a spoiler alert here for people who are looking is going, oh wow. I mean, this sounds cool. I want to watch it, and I would recommend it. If you like films about era and films about Nazis, it's not terrible. It's not perfect. It's not terrible, but the ending. Oh. So to give a bit of a rundown, we were now what 10, 20 years after the war, and
it's those elements are supposed to be set present day, so 67.
So 20 plus years after the war, we now have a French police inspector, I think, sort of trying to track down. He's still basically investigating this murder of a prostitute from 1942. Again, really? I mean, a lot of people died in that war. I seriously doubt a post-war police force would be spending any energy on this. But they basically, through being investigators, tracked down this General Towns, who is the man who did this. They find a witness, and they attend a reunion of General Towns' SS division, at which he's presenting or the guest of honor. And they confront him with the witness that he's been basically, he's done. And if this were an episode of The Bill, someone would go, "You're nicked." There we go. That would be an interesting crossover. You don't know what The Bill is, Google it. But he basically says General Tarns, former General Tarns, turns to his aide or friend or whatever the guy is and says, "Give me your gun."
Yeah.
And he hands him his gun, and they let him leave the room, go to a different room, and then shoot himself in the head. And I'm like, everyone's just standing around watching. I'm like, would you not be like, "Hey, put the gun down, stop, I'll shoot you"? Who knows what?
Yeah, it's like, okay, you know what? Yes, we're going to confront this general who's recently just got released for war crimes and is being celebrated for his efforts during the war. Yep. Okay. Cool. We'll get him. We'll knock him down so that it's a very public and it just ruins his career for all time. Blah blah blah. Maybe that's what they were thinking. And it's like, yes, we're just going to have a casual conversation. Just mildly suggest that it could very well be you. Oh yes. We also have a witness. Oh yes. We will let you just wander off with a gun. And
it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Everybody's, you just shot himself. Oh shit. Probably shouldn't have done that, eh? It was pathetic. It was such a very, for a film, it was kind of atypical, I think, for its era in a lot of ways. It was a very atypical, pathetic ending for the film. It was really weak. Yeah. And just like it's almost like the writers ran out of ideas.
Yeah. So like, oh shit, he needs his comeuppance. Yeah, I've run out of ink on my pen. Sorry.
I'm fine, with him committing suicide at the end of the film but there would have been so many more artistic or authentic.
There were so many better ways that they could have played it. They could have played up slowly throughout the movie. The General Tance is actually more of a coward. And so by him committing suicide, being the coward's way out of, instead of having to go back to jail where he just got out of, that's what he chose. And they just build more of the character story around that, perhaps.
Yeah. It was an interesting experience. I'm glad we did it.
Me too.
I would be glad I picked it. But hey, I'll put my hand up if I make us watch a piece of shit. I've done that before. But it's interesting to take us back to an era we're not familiar with or we haven't been used to. You're going to take us somewhere next. You've got a lot of outs in this film.
Well, I also actually have a side, because we were talking about anime last week and you asked about more reality-based anime and things like that. And I suddenly remembered, this movie helped me remember an amazing miniseries called Monster. And it's about It starts with a well-revered doctor saving the life of these two kids in a murder that happens at a very prestigious family. And years later, find out that one of those kids is apparently a serial killer, and the doctor feels this great remorse for having saved the life of a monster. And he is now kind of put it upon himself to try and track this guy down and bring justice. It's really good. And I recommend you trying to track it down because I think you might like it.
I'll see what I can do. Doesn't seem like it instantly pops up on places.
Maybe it may have to go through like Anime Lab or Funimation or something like that, and you may be able to get it that way. But keep an eye. And I do have the manga version of it if you wanted to read it.
I don't get to read for fun anymore. I have to study.
Now, going back to our new Chain movie, as you said, there's a lot of possibilities, and I have a whole page of possibilities. Here are some of the possibilities. Some of them are very obvious, like you could go to Dr. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, The Lion in Winter, Halloween, The Prince of Darkness. There's one that I want to do, but I don't know if we'll get it. And the only reason I really want to do it is partly because I've heard that it's quite a good movie and it would lead us to Krull.
No. Won't do it. I went to watch that last September for my other podcast available now, wherever you download good podcasts from. And no, we've done it on this show before.
We haven't done Krull on this show.
Yeah, we have. We've done Krull before. But maybe on the old show. It
might have been on the old show, yeah.
But I had to watch that last year. No.
All right, fine.
No
Well,
Krull.
In that case, I will give you a choice. Do you want comedy or do you want serious?
Honestly, you pick.
Oh, fucking hell. Well.
Not going to make this easy for you.
Okay. In that case, we're going to follow Peter O'Toole, and we are going to go to a Stephen Fry directed movie from the early 2000s called Bright Young Things.
Not familiar with it.
Now, I remember watching this in the cinema, and I remember it quite fondly.
Okay, well, it could be interesting. We had that interesting experience with Syriana last week, where we both fondly remembered it, and then watched it again. Oh, actually,
it'll be curious to see. I was like, oh no.
On YouTube, it's on Google Play, so it's legally available in our country. Whoa.
And this is an adaptation of Evelyn Vaughan's novel Vile Bodies. It's a look into the lives of a young novelist, his would-be lover, and the host of young people who beautified London in the 1930s.
Cara Kitty says Stephen Fry. I adore him. I like Stephen Fry as well. I really used to was it QI he used to host.
Yes.
And I thought he was really good in V for Vendetta.
He's usually pretty good. I mean, he was even good as Mycroft in Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows.
Oh, and Mansfield Park, he played the bumbling detective.
Yep.
That was really good. And was it Fry and Laurie?
Yes, a bit of Fry and Laurie. Fantastic.
And that show was, when you go back and watch that, is the guy.
But we've got this movie gives you plenty of offshoots as well. So just off the top billing, there's Stephen Campbell, Emily Mortimer, Dan Aykroyd, Michael Sheen, James McAvoy, Stockard Channing, David Tennant in there, Jim Broadbent, Steve Callow. It's got a good collection of some of the icons of British cinema. Obviously, being British, they are going to sneak in there. But
and based on a book by Evelyn Waugh, who has had many of his books. I always thought Evelyn Waugh was a woman, but it's him. So anyway, many of his books turned into films. So And it opens up Stephen Fry, which could take us to V for Vendetta, which I will not do.
No.
I like that film, but I don't think it would be a very
We don't need to go back to it.
constructive discussion. Anyway, that is an interesting choice. I have not seen it.
So next week, Chain Movie of the Week is Bright Young Things, directed by Stephen Fry. Now, let's get on to a bit more of the meat and potatoes of this episode, something that no one is talking about. No one has even thought about this movie since 2017. Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's right.
Yeah.
And fair warning, ladies and gentlemen, spoilers if you haven't already watched it.
I mean, I feel like it's a 4-year-old film, and the plot is essentially exactly the same as the theatrical release. So, if you haven't seen it, you probably don't want to. And if you haven't seen it, I think some of our viewers might actually, Miss Foxy, in fact, I know for a fact, has not seen the theatrical version, but did sit through the 4-hour director's cut. So there might be some who have interested in seeing the director's cut. But anyway, we were both in a camp. We talked a little about last week of being kind of like, when we saw it in 2017, you and I vehemently disagreed on Batman vs Superman, but we were kind of on the same page with this one.
Yes.
Theatrical release, going, it wasn't bad.
It wasn't an utter mess.
It got worse the more you watched it, though.
Yes.
Once you got over the novelty of seeing a bunch of cool superheroes on the screen today doing cool superhero shit, it didn't hold up very well. It got worse. I talked about being in hospital and watching it 3 times in 3 days or whatever it was, and it didn't help my health.
We can't understand why he died, sir. It's like, well, let's just look at what he.
It was So I kind of went in with very low expectations. But I mean, you and I have had a spoiler alert. We had a cheeky catch up on Saturday night. It's actually the first time we have seen each other in person since your birthday last year, which I think would have been June.
Yes, when we had the cocktail potion making. Yeah, that was the last time we saw each other in person.
So we did compare notes a little bit here. So this is not quite planning. We don't plan.
No. But
we did compare notes. I think it's fair to say we both walked away giving this film a thumbs up, and it is a lot better than the theatrical release.
100%, 100%. It's this is. I said to Travis over when we met up that this is just further evidence that Zack Snyder is not very good at telling a concise story. It's either paper thin, kind of basic stuff. The likes of, like, he doesn't go into any of the social commentary that the original Dawn of the Dead did, but his Dawn of the Dead is still a fun jaunt through a zombie movie. And then you've got Sucker Punch, which is eye candy, but it is just a mess of a story. It is the one and only time he has ever written something entirely unique for himself, and it's sort of like, okay,
that film. I don't.
I don't hate it at all. It's just
some people really don't like it.
Story-wise, a mess, and I can understand why a lot of people would kind of go, it's ridiculously sexist. And so I'm like, I don't know if it's sexist, but it definitely hypes up the sex value.
I've always thought of him as a director who values style over substance. Not to the degree of, say, a Michael Bay. Explosion Central, but he's far more stylish than Michael Bay. I'm not putting him in that category, but it's easier to tell a good story. Like, I think we both like Watchmen.
Yes.
It's easy to do that when you've got that kind of amazing source material. So when you're picking up something like Sucker Punch is a little bit harder to do. In this sense, I don't think Justice League story is in the category of a Watchmen. So in trying to tell a story, an epic, story in that space, is a little bit more of a challenge for someone like him who just doesn't do. Christopher Nolan can pull it off because he's good at both.
Yes.
But few are. And he's not.
But then you look at his ultimate version of Watchmen is overall better paced. It makes more narrative sense and it flows better. As does, even though it's far less of a completely different movie as Zack Snyder's Justice League versus Joss Whedon's Justice League, the Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, it does again improve it. Just all evidence to show that Zack Snyder needs a better editor, for one thing, and he needs to invest more time in actually getting a concise story, a focused story, because none of his movies are ever focused except for 300.
So, backstory here for people who are going, what the fuck are you talking about? If you haven't been, like, it's not as common knowledge as I think it is, I think. Zack Snyder was signed up as the creative genius behind the DC Extended Universe, which was supposed to be the DC Comics version, the Warner Brothers Studios version of what Disney and Marvel have created in their world. He wrote and directed Man of Steel. He wrote and directed Batman versus Superman, both of which were, Man of Steel was kind of like, people are like, all right. Superman versus Batman and Superman was critically panned and didn't do badly, but it didn't do as well as the studio would have hoped. So come Justice League, there are a lot of doubts about his ability to helm this incredible franchise for much longer. And then, so he basically filmed the film he wanted to shoot. But then before it could be finished and sort of edited and, compiled into the final product, he had a family tragedy. His daughter passed away. Tragically. And he had to step away from the finishing the product. Warner Brothers, quite cynically, I think, took this opportunity to basically retool the entire fucking thing. So they went out and they got Joss Whedon. Initially, I think the idea was they were going to get, he's just going to come in, he's just going to edit it all, polish it off, and then release it. Instead, they basically gave him some money and said, you can reshoot stuff if you like, and could you make it less dour? Because I think anything, everyone had kind of accused Snyder's films at that point in DCEU of being very dour and depressing and bleak. Whether you agree with it or not, that was kind of a general opinion. Yeah. And so Whedon came in and reshot a bunch of stuff, re-edited it. The film looks completely different. And
the focus of the narrative is entirely different as well.
The whole thing, basically, there's entire new scenes being shot for Whedon's version, and then it was released to a global sort of, well, I think it was actually, the critical response was maybe as bad, if not worse, as was the Batman vs Superman. People hated it. It didn't do well in the box office at all. I mean, maybe it made a profit, but I mean, we're talking the first Avengers film made $1.5 billion, Endgame 2.4 billion or something like that. So we're talking, if your film doesn't make $1 billion now, if you've got this cast of heroes,
if it's a superhero movie and it makes less than 850 million, it's considered a bomb, basically.
And this film was not cheap to make. So it kind of bombed critically and box office wise. And I will finish in a sec. But one of the things that was really obvious about this was that you could see the joins. So obviously, you could see the joins between what Whedon had done, what Snyder had done. And it's very interesting now. You can do an A/B comparison between the two, and you can go, yep, that was Snyder, that was Whedon. Apparently, Snyder incorporated nothing into the director's cut that was shot by Whedon. And you can just see the joints. I guess they don't mix, There's the two guys who have completely
oil and
style.
water.
So that is how we ended up here. And I guess two things I think have led to this is, one is COVID. Cinemas are closed. And Warner Brothers would like to make some money now, please, if they could. And also streaming. This kind of film probably couldn't have been released 5 years ago on it without the availability of a streaming service like HBO Max, who really, really would like you to buy their service if you're an American, because you can't buy it here. And hence they have, hey, well, you know what? We've got this 4-hour film. It's essentially done. We've already paid for it. It's done. It's in the can. For an extra, I've heard numbers of 15 million. I don't know what they actually. Snyder took no money to make this, and so for maybe I don't know, 20 million or something. Depending on who you ask. You can basically turn that 4 hours of footage that Snyder's already shot that's sitting there on a shelf. You could turn that into something that people are very interested in seeing because people have been campaigning #release the Snyder Cut. They've been asking for this for a number of years. So here we have the 4-hour version of the Justice League has landed on HBO Max. That's how we got to now. And that's a bit long, I know. But it's an interesting story, I think, because one of the things I was thinking while watching this is how often do we get to see this?
It's so true. And there are some movies, like legendary movies, that you kind of go, oh, wow, that was messed up by studio interference. The one that always jumps to my mind is David Fincher's Alien movie. Like, what would that have been like if there wasn't the studio interference? What movie would he have delivered? That would be an interesting one. The one that's now starting to come around is release David Ayer's version of Suicide Squad. It's
please
like,
no,
I'm okay. I'm okay. Let James Gunn's one be all that we remember going forward.
Give it some air. So, I guess from a film geek's perspective, what I found fascinating watching is probably for the first couple of hours, and we'll get into the quality of the story, just the technical side of it. I mean, it's like, there's so much new stuff. So the original film is 2 hours, just about. So a theatrical film, theatrical release. And what do you reckon? New footage in that 40 minutes? Maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes?
Of the theatrical cut?
Yeah. How much
I would say about half.
50-50. So I used an hour's worth of Snyder's footage in the theatrical release, and I used an hour's worth of Whedon's footage. Makes me really wonder that you look at some of the sequences that Warner Brothers and Whedon decided to cut from that release in 2017. You go, what an incredibly dispiriting thing it must have been for all the people who worked on it. So the sequence where we meet the Flash, where he saves, I don't know the character, saves a lady from a car crash. It's probably arguably the best sequence in the film, depending who you ask. I loved it. And can you imagine how much work went into that? So essentially we have a car crash into a truck, and Flash, if you don't know who the Flash is, why are you watching his show? He's really fast. And ironically, we've seen this kind of scene before, right? With Quicksilver in the Marvel films, but he runs really fast, and time stands still because he's moving so quickly. And he's able to rescue the driver of a car and do
Iris West.
Sorry, Iris West. And, who I assume would arguably become a love interest in a standalone Flash film, but they may or may not yet make. And he does some other quirky stuff that there's a character with who he is, and we learn about. And there's a lot of special effects that go into that shot, and they were willing to just throw that away. Like this incredible shot, beautifully made, and really sets up who the character is, and we're going to throw that on the floor. And if in a different time, it would have landed on a DVD somewhere, but we would maybe have never seen this before. So there are 3 hours of shit that Warner Bros. Are just happy to turf. It must have cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make.
I wonder about this, and I think considering a lot of stuff that's come out over the last few months about the production during this movie, the racism, sexism, and just bullying and things like that on the set from producers, director Joss Whedon, and things like that. I wonder if when Zack Snyder stepped away, there were already rumors that they were kind of at a bit of loggerheads about the style and the focus for the audience of the movie. I wonder if they really took this and just went, okay, you know what? We're going to not look a gift horse in the mouth, and we want to refocus. We want to redo. We had a success with Wonder Woman. We need to get a little bit more of that fun, jovial side into it. We want to start divorcing ourselves from it. But when you look at all of the Zack Snyder footage from the original release, as well as everything in this, it is not one that you can really easily use that footage and just go, hey, isn't that fun?
It is a lighter tone than Batman v Superman or Man of Steel. And because he actually has a comic relief character in there, being the Flash, I found it significantly less dour than the other films he made, and pleasingly so. And while I still kind of chuckled a little bit at the jokes in Whedon's version, they didn't fit at the same time. So,
and they were divorced kind of character representations. In Joss Whedon's version, Aquaman was really kind of useless and pathetic, whereas this, he was much more of a superhero. Let me say, he was actually better, and Wonder Woman's character arc made more sense. Who'd have thought?
Oh, that too. Before we get into the character, I just want to finish with one other note, and I think this is probably something to keep in mind, and this tags on what George was just saying about Snyder needs a better editor in particular. Cara Kitty and says Miss Foxy says we'll have to deal with Jared Leto. Spoilers, we're going to get to him. And Cara Kitty says Jared Leto has to deal with Jared Leto. We'll have to deal with ourselves, which is far worse than dealing with a stranger / celebrity. Deep.
It's far too deep for our show.
as I always say, as a rock star, Jared Leto makes a great actor, but here we are. Maybe that doesn't stand up quite so much anymore. The question you have to keep in mind about this film is, while everybody is raving about it, relative speaking, you get very positive reviews for the Snyder Cut.
Yeah,
it's 4 hours long. 4 hours is what it took for Justice League to work. At 2 hours, it didn't work. Even with, obviously Whedon's version stuff adding in, it didn't help. But I don't see how this film would work at 2 hours, even if Whedon hadn't had to leave production. He, in a different universe, how does he slice 2 hours off this film and make it into something that will work? Because I severely doubt after Batman v Superman, he was going to get this sign off on a 3 hour or 3 hour version of this film. Like the Russo brothers earned it in the MCU. The MCU fucking earned 3 hours for Endgame. It did not end. Snyder had absolutely not earned it at this point. The zeitgeist was against him. Maybe he gets 2.5 hours from Warner Brothers. Maybe. They were really, really hoping for 2. So he lost 90 minutes off this film. I don't know how this film works at 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's that's the thing that a lot of people I've been talking to have said. It's like, the story makes sense. It's like, I want to see, just as an exercise, Zack Snyder do a theatrical cut of this version of the movie, because it would be a mess. It would be a mess. There would be huge sequences dropped out. I think that if they were going to do it, they'd probably either get rid of the Amazon fight sequence where Steppenwolf finally claims the first mother box. I think they would drop that largely and do it more as just a blink and you'll miss it kind of story narrative. I think that the elements of Steppenwolf kind of kidnapping the Atlantans and things like that would go. I think that most of the cyborg stuff would stay, because I think that's largely one of the strongest kind of threads throughout the whole movie, and it gives a bit more pathos to one of the characters that was just very, very much sidelined in the Joss Whedon
Snyder,
version.
I think, said he's the heart of a film, and when you see this, you see that absolutely 100%. I'm with you on that one, Zach. He got that 100% right.
Agreed.
It probably doesn't matter at the end of the day. He got the 4 hour cut he wanted, and the film. It goes again back to the original problem with this film was they rushed it. And they suddenly realized they were years behind Marvel, in that Marvel had already, made a whole bunch of their films, and they wanted to get to the Justice League and some of that Avengers money now. So we didn't have a film to introduce all the characters the way that we did in the MCU, and hence he had to cram all that development into this film at 4 hours, which, when you watch the 4-hour version, works quite well.
I think part of DC's problem was the fact that when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was coming out, Chris Nolan came out with Batman Begins and then The Dark Knight, and then he finished his trilogy with arguably the weaker of the trilogy, but regardless, it set a very definite tone, and people were already going, where's Superman? Superman has been missing off the screen for a very long time. People weren't happy with how the last Superman movie, Superman Returns, was. They didn't like that. They wanted more of Chris Nolan stuff. And meanwhile, this darker, more realistic superhero movie that Chris Nolan had created and presented was at complete odds to what Marvel have done. And they had the first phase movies were largely kind of the weakest ones when you look at it, because they were still finding their feet on how they're going to tell those stories, how they're going to make those billion-dollar movies. Still relatively successful, even when you look back on them. But it was, DC was kind of caught on the back foot. So like, okay, all right, so we need to bring Superman back to the screen. Everyone is wondering where it is. They want to know it. We know that we're going to be able to make money off of it. But people also want Chris Nolan. And Chris Nolan is not exactly the most a director that plays with the notion of hope very often. It is very real and almost kind of sanitary in some ways. So having the comics figurative, embodiment of hope, largely, of Superman being godfathered by someone who doesn't really consider that and looks at kind of cold hard facts of things, it's not a big fit. And then it's like, oh shit, yeah, they're making billion-dollar movies over at Marvel. We need to speed this up. Come on, quicker.
And that costs them in the end, because you can't rush these things in the sense of, you can get away with that with Superman because people know Superman, right? We know Batman. The rest of it you can't rush because people don't read comic books. Like I've seen one of the elements of his film, just to jump ahead a little bit, is the anti-life equation, which is interesting. And I had to Google it afterwards. But I've seen a bunch of arguments on Facebook going, well, actually, any comic book fan worth their salt will know exactly what the anti-life equation is. You're like, that is what, like, 0.1% of a fucking film's audience. Like, nobody knows what that is. So nobody knows who's Cyborg. I knew nothing about Cyborg. The only Flash story I knew was from a TV show in 1990. And that's not well remembered. These characters need room to breathe. You need to reintroduce even Batman. This is not Nolan's Batman. This is Affleck needed a Batman movie. Absolutely needed a Batman movie. He did not need Batman v Superman. He needed his own movie to introduce us to who he was and his story. So this was a massive. I mean, at the time I think it was a massive miss from DC, the thought that they could just suddenly jump ahead and start introducing these characters on the fly. At a time, this is a much better job. But in the initial theatrical version, it was through the PowerPoint presentation in Batman vs Superman.
Check out this link that I sent you.
Pretty much a link to some videos. So that was all we got. This is much better in the sense that we now, like, Cyborg was given a really short shrift, which is actually quite fascinating when you combine it with, as you said, the allegations made against Joss Whedon by Ray Fisher during production. You kind of go, well, if you look at the final product, kind of with Ray here, right? Like, because there's so much stuff. He came across as kind of whiny and annoying in the theatrical cut, but he came across as much more human in this. In a lot of ways, and his motives are significantly better explained. You understand where he's coming from. It all makes more sense. It's in context. Context matters. I mean, I know a lot of people said the Flash was annoying in the theatrical version. I didn't think so. I found him enjoyable. I like Ezra Miller. I think he's a great choice as the Flash. But again, even with that extra scene I was talking about, where he saves, he rescues the driver of a car. Who, sorry, I'm not going to remember her name until I see their Flash movie. It's brilliantly done, and it really establishes his character wonderfully. And he's not as goofy in this. He's funny, but not goofy.
Yeah,
which is the right tone for him in this film. The meeting between Affleck and Aquaman. You know, I think in the Joss Whedon, when they did reshoots, I didn't realize that was a reshoot. They did a reshoot in the Justice League, where he goes, "Yo, I hear you talk to fish."
Yeah,
I think it was supposed to be a joke, but it didn't work.
I'm so glad that all of that stuff was taken out. And the sequence in the Justice League version where it's like, can you just go out? Do you talk to fish? This is like, oh, come on. Batman is supposed to be the world's greatest detective. He wouldn't ask dumb questions like that. Get it out of there. Come on.
Batman still, I think, is the weakest link in this film for me. I think I actually had this conversation with you when we announced it. Like, we announced the film. It's like, how does Batman make himself useful in a fight between superheroes? He has no powers, and unlike the MCU, we have the same problem with Black Widow, and they have Hawkeye, who don't actually have any powers. I think they still do a pretty good job of making them feel useful, But this film, I mean, I always wondered how Batman, could actually be a useful ally, and you sort of always said he would be the general. He would go all the plans and the equipment and facilitating things to happen. He kind of does that in parts, but when we get down to it, he stands on the sidelines shooting people with a laser gun, and I kind of feel ripped off because Batman is the most popular hero they have in DC, or it's the most marketable, and they can't think of anything useful for him to do.
Yeah. I think if they really wanted to tell a Motherbox Darkseid anti-life equation saga, they needed an independent Batman movie. Before they did Justice League, they could have had it between the two movies. They could have had a really fucking cool, hyper intense one night in Gotham kind of thing, just following Batman right after sort of like, the world didn't fucking stop. All of the psychopathic villains in Gotham didn't stop being psychopathic villains just because Superman died. They would have taken the opportunity to go, yes. Batman wouldn't have had an opportunity to stop. They could have brought in a little bit more of the psychological breakdown that could very well happen and drive the character of Batman Bruce Wayne, and just like a movie set over the course of just one night, like 2 days after the death of Superman, just to help seed a little bit more of that kind of characteristic or the breakdown of his character, or the rebuilding of him to be more of a general and be willing to take a step back. They could have done something more with that. I think that would have been smart, but they didn't. And
I think that the film suffers for it. I mean, I think it suffers a lot less.
And I think that poor Ben Affleck really suffers because he physically, and he is a great Batman.
He's great. Again, the warehouse scene in Batman vs Superman is arguably the best action sequence in any Batman film, period. And like all of it were like, oh, hang on a second. I was hating this film to this point, but hang on. I think I'm on board with Batfleck now. Like, and you're right, he plays a older, grislier Batman, probably better than the older Batman that Bale played in Dark Knight Rises in a lot of ways. Yeah. So there's a lot of potential there. They wasted. They pissed it against the wall. I know exactly what reference you're talking about there, and I approve. The strongest point of DC films usually are the villains. And we've had some conversation about some of the villains today. We'll get to Jared Leto's villain in a minute. But what did you make of the updated Steppenwolf?
Visually improved, but still not compelling. But being able to actually tell a bit more of a sympathetic story arc and just have even just nuggets of things, the reasons why he's doing this come through, where he is talking to Desard and he is presented before Darkseid. I just suddenly went, okay, there's more at stake for this guy. He's not just a big goon that's been sent by Darkseid to take over, to take the mother boxes and reclaim them for Darkseid. He's actually doing this because he has lost favor with Darkseid, and there's more of a desperation and a personal desire to do this. It's not necessarily, I'm just doing this because my boss said so.
Because I'm evil and
yeah,
I like just like conquering worlds. It's what I do on the weekend.
Yeah,
it makes a lot more sense. He has motivation, and we talked at length on the show about how Marvel's weakest link to date has been its villains. Generic Marvel villain number 467, the guy in
it's evil Iron Man 2.0.
Yeah, or like the guy in Ant-Man who was just like, what? He was like the most generic villain of all time.
Wait, which one?
The first one, right? I didn't get the actor's name. Right?
The yellow jacket.
Yellow jacket, right?
Yeah.
So the only time I've really got it right is with Loki, and some of the Netflix shows, which aren't canon anymore. So don't mention them. But also, they just knocked it out of the park with Thanos, which is ironic considering Thanos is a ripoff of Darkseid.
Yes.
They got in first in the movies, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. But they did do a reasonably as good a job as they could have done to making him have some motives other than, like I said, just being evil. And I didn't like his look. Everyone dissed his look in the first film. It didn't bother me quite so much. I kind of thought the CGI was kind of shitty. His character, but at least he had a reason for what he was doing. It wasn't a great reason, but it was a reason.
Yeah.
And that counts for something, which is, if I had said, you'll know better than me because you're a comic book reader, but as I said, DC have the best villains. And usually they get that right. And in this film, it was, I don't know. In hindsight, was Steppenwolf the best choice available to him? Maybe not.
Because when you start reading some of the stuff that Zack Snyder wanted to do with Justice League 2 and 3 and going into the Nightmare world and things like that, he had this grand epic, and we've both talked about how Kevin Feige has got a room somewhere covered with post-it notes on how one thing leads to another. Zack Snyder's got that, but I think he's got it all in his head, and trying to explain that to other people he's not very good at. And I think his grand story arc, Steppenwolf, is kind of a good idea because of where he sits in the pantheon of extra-dimensional intergalactic villains that can pose some form of threat, that is that experience boosting bad guy you get in a game where you're gonna probably die against him the first time you go up, and then you start getting some of his quirks, and then you do it, and then you suddenly, boom, I'm into the next stage. The difficulty level has gone from normal to hard, but I still feel like a badass. And I get why they did that. But because the Suicide Squad movie came out before this, and they had like elements of the old gods suggested in that movie, and the old gods versus the new gods is a really, really cool in the comics. And if they had gone with actually presenting the bad guys in Suicide Squad as old gods versus new gods, then it would have made more sense as to why everything else comes in, and they could have actually brought in Steppenwolf as more of a viable threat independently. There's a lot that they should have done, but they didn't. For the movie that they made, I think that Darkseid would have been a mistake.
No, you probably don't want to start at the top because, again, Anstey did that well, and the first Avengers film was Loki. But the interesting thing there was we had a personal connection to Loki because we'd met him before. We'd had a whole film about his relationship, him and Thor. They're brothers. We know them. Tom Hiddleston was fucking great in the role. It worked really, really well. Ultron, did Ultron really well? It wasn't a great film, but I think Ultron was a good villain, done well by James Spader. But in a better film, maybe he would have been better. But you don't want to jump straight to Thanos.
And the other thing for it, sorry, just to cut you off quickly, is by not using it, I think that was probably one of the golden rules that Warner Brothers came down on Zack Snyder early on to say is like, don't use Darkseid, because they came out with a middling to mild success of Man of Steel, the underperforming Batman v Superman. Zack Snyder was on shaky ground. They didn't want to blow the big bad on Zack Snyder and go, fuck, we can't reintroduce Darkseid for another 10 years because it fucked up in that.
Yeah, you can't reboot it that quickly and go with something a little bit lower.
So this is sort of like, one of his generals, we're willing to throw Steppenwolf on the sacrificial fire.
And I thought that was a smart choice. It just, I don't know, it didn't, I mean, at least in the theatrical version, he had, his motivations were murky and terrible, and people thought he looked terrible.
There's that scene in the theatrical cut, which I'm so glad it's gone in this one. It's like him where he's chasing after the Amazonian's mother box, and he's sort of like talking to the queen. It's like, you will love me. It's like, what?
Creepy.
What the fuck?
What do you make of Darkseid's portrayal in this? I kind of thought it looked shithouse.
It was classic Darkseid, not theatrical, not cinematic in a way, and especially considering the generally muted colors that Zack Snyder uses, it just doesn't look as empowering. I liked the brief bits that I got. I didn't think it was shit. I feel like the problem that they used, and it was a problem with Steppenwolf as well, is like the paratroopers as well. Parademons, sorry. They wanted them to look so realistic, and yet they're fucking aliens. You can go weird. You can have weird colors with them. It's okay to go weird when you're going in fucking space. The same problem was with the Green Lantern movie when they went to OA, and you had all these Green Lantern aliens from all over the place. They went crazy with the species, and it's like the stuff on OA in the Green Lantern movie is the best part of it. The CGI of their Green Lantern Corps uniforms, not so much, but the way that like Kilowog and Jeffrey Rush's character, they look and the way they move, it's more interesting visually. It's more pleasing and interesting than what we had with Steppenwolf or Darkseid.
So some of the stuff that I was really, really liked about this, because I think I've been a little critical in the last couple of bits, but the fight scene, you mentioned it earlier, the Amazon, the battle between the Amazons and Darkseid and his crew, way more brutal, way better. And I don't feel like it was a lot longer. Maybe a little,
really,
not a whole lot longer. And it made the Amazons look a lot more badass than they were in the original. They're quite pathetic in the theatrical, make them look lame and like, why? It's like, okay, that's lame. Like, they're defending this majorly important thing, and they kind of suck. By the same token, Wonder Woman's fight scene where she battles the terrorists, who are taking hostages, school children hostages in a bank. That was actually a reasonably good scene in the theatrical version, but it's bumped up to 11 in this because she looks fucking badass in this film. Like, way more badass. Patty Jenkins needs to fucking go back to school and take notes about what Snyder did with her in this. I know Snyder took some criticism at the time, like, oh, he's overly sexualized the Amazons in this film. But I didn't notice that. But I mean, compared to Wonder Woman 84, She could have used a scene like this. This is a classic. I know when we talked Wonder Woman 84, we're like, oh, it's a throwback to the old style 80s hero goofy. But this is a kind of film scene I could have seen in a Superman film from Christopher Reeve Superman film. I could have seen something like this, but she's such a badass in this scene, and and I really like that she's like really brutal as well. Like she beats the shit out of these terrorists, and like she flings him into walls, and there were bloodstains left in the walls, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to see. Like she doesn't take no prisoners.
Yeah, that's one thing you put on something that just I'm watching it again now, and it now grates me. Every single fight, someone gets thrown into a wall and gets embedded in it. It's like, what? Why? Why is that the go-to move that is in every single fucking fight?
What has Zack Snyder got against walls?
No, it's so annoying.
He was like throwing people through walls. It's like he's saying.
It is so annoying. Every single superhero and every single other character involved in a fight sequence gets embedded into the walls or stairs. And it's like, come on. I know that you're doing that to just show how much velocity is being thrown at them. But not every fight needs it. It's okay.
Needless to say, though, that fight scene, again, not a whole lot longer in the Snyder Cut than it was in the theatrical cut. So why? And Wonder Woman comes off a lot better in this. Like they would have nerfed it in the theatrical cut. In this version, she comes across as a serious badass. And maybe if they'd left the wall throwing to cut this scene with Wonder Woman in it, she looks like a badass who's not taking any prisoners with these terrorists who just had to blow up a building and kill a bunch of people. Though that said, the way she dispatches of a last terrorist is a little bit of overkill. Where she does the whole her bangs her wrist and like blows the side of a building off when like you're faster than bullets. We've seen that. Why don't you just punch the guy throw him into a wall? Yeah, throw him to the floor. Yes, throw him to the floor.
Throw him to the floor, Steppenwolf.
Throw him to the floor. I'm sure that would have done the job. But that was a little bit. That was very Snyder-esque because people criticized Man of Steel for being very over the top with the amount of destruction involved in that film. So he learned no lessons from it. He did it again here. But overall, those two scenes, like for maybe I don't know, 2 minutes extra screen time. I didn't time it, but 2 minutes extra. We have completely established the Amazons as badasses, and Wonder Woman is a complete badass. And that's what you want. You want your heroes to look like badasses, I think.
I'll tell you one sequence that initially I thought, oh, that's annoying. That I liked that one, but then the payoff was much better. Was the Flash when they rescue the hostages? I really liked the interaction that he has. It's like I usually just push people and run away, and then Batman just says save one, and he does, and then it just clicks and he saves them all. That was cool. And not seeing that little moment in this, I was like, oh. And then having the sequence where he's just running up and down the stairs, kind of going, come on, hurry up, quicker. It's like, oh, come on. The Flash would not just do that. He cleared an entire fucking city when a nuclear bomb was going to be landed on it in 0.01 seconds because the Martian Manhunter went fucking crazy. That was an amazing sequence in the comics. And then they go, oh, yeah, you thought we were going to leave him without a hero moment. And then the fucking moment where he's just like momentary kind of glimpses as he's stopping all of that debris coming down on them. That looked fucking cool.
It was interesting because, like I said earlier, the guy who moves so fast, everything is standing still thing has been done now, right? Probably definitively by Quicksilver in Days of Future Past. I felt the Marvel Quicksilver was lame. Probably because they cast Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he's terrible.
Very wood.
But this really didn't feel derivative. It felt fresh in a way it had no right to be.
Yeah.
Like even the scene where Wonder Woman drops her sword, he gets a sprint around the side, he gets a plunk, and so her sword starts to move back towards it. I think that was in the Whedon cut, but I can't remember. But at the same time, it's still really effective. And obviously, again, Snyder put nothing that Whedon shot in this, so obviously it was his choice.
And I love the fact that they showed the Flash powers in multiple ways, like the car accident with Iris West at the start. They super slow motion, and you see him just smiling as he enjoys just kind of looking at things around. So like, sausage, I'll put that in, that'll help me later on. Being super delicate to make sure that she comes down gentle. And then you've got other little pepperings where he slows everything down to grab the batarang out of the sky. And then this sequence where the debris, and it's just time is not slowed down. You're just seeing him moving so fucking fast with the blue lightning everywhere. He's just an after image repeatedly all over the place. It's like, cool. Yes. You don't need to go, yes, this is how we're always going to represent his power. We can show it in different ways. It's fantastic.
I don't want to take too long on this. I think it's fair we like it. Can we talk about the epilogue?
Unneeded.
The epilogue was complete trash. Am I wrong?
I really liked everything that it was setting up. That story we're never going to fucking see. It was entirely unnecessary in this release. They could have just happily just gone, yep, we are going to release this little snippet of once was the DCEU launching pad. They utterly didn't need it. They didn't need to go forward. And yes, I get that they wanted to have another little element of having Martian Manhunter come in and just talk to Bruce Wayne at the end. It's like, okay, fine, sure, you really need to do that. You don't really need to fucking do that.
Martian Manhunter makes 2 appearances in this film. Once, partway through the film, after shape-shifting into Martha Kent, thoroughly confused me. And I'd suggest is possibly the worst scene in the film, apart from the epilogue, in the sense that if you don't know who that is,
you are not going to know.
I didn't. My first thought was, why are Skrulls in this film? That's what he looks like.
Not far off the point.
In Captain Marvel, a Marvel thing. So I'm like, hang on a second, what is that? Why is that a parrot? It's not a paradigm. Why? What is that? And there's no explanation for that. And it's actually a nice scene before that. So you're like, what? So that scene completely does not work. But the post-credit scene, unless we find out who it is, Martian Manhunter. So the post-credit sequence is the epilogue. The epilogue consists of the original post-credit scene, which included Lex Luthor meeting Deathstroke, and someone who shall remain nameless asked me, wasn't he in Suicide Squad? I'm like, no, that was Deadshot. Completely different. And
you are not being named or shamed at all.
No. But you both start with D. But then we also have a follow-on, I guess, or a continuation of the nightmare sequence from Batman v Superman, where Batman sort of has a dream of a apocalyptic future where Superman's gone bad and works with Darkseid, I guess one we could say. Yeah. And that is the scene that we were talking about earlier with Jared Leto as the Joker. They reshot some scenes recently separately. Affleck and Leto shot the scene separately. Where Joker, we have Batman, we have Flash, we have Deathstroke, and Amber Heard.
Yep.
And they are hiding from Cyborg as well. Sorry, and they are hiding from. We can only assume find out later it's Superman. And there's a conversation takes place between Batman and Jared Leto, who's been kept prisoner, I guess is kind of the angle they're going for there. And it's actually an interesting conversation between the two of them. And in a better film, or in a better place in the film, maybe. I don't know how to describe it. It might, in a world where a sequel was going to take place, I would have
been good.
But we know that's never going to happen. So we're almost certain it's never going to happen because Snyder says he's done.
I wonder if because it's still going to take a long time before the DCEU is rebuilt and reestablished, and they still desperately want HBO Go to be a success. I wonder if they will go the animation route and go, you know what, we're not going to do the $200 million live action movie. We can get the actors to come back to do the voices, or if they're too expensive, then we'll get someone who sounds similar to them, and we'll just tell that story, and we'll just release it on HBO. And if they're successful, then we can release them simultaneously in the cinema as well, if people are really interested, really excited about it. That way we're honoring the Zack Snyder cut, but we're also leaving the door open so that we can move on to other things in the cinema if we want to.
I wouldn't hold my breath, but it would be interesting to see from a fan of the Animatrix, which we talk about regularly. I think it would be fascinating to see something like that. Then the final sequence in the epilogue is Martian Manhunter turning up at Bruce Wayne's house and letting him know, hey, I'm around. Here's the digits. Give me a call. You know,
which if I was Batman and there's just this green floating guy comes down and he's like, I've been known as a Martian Manhunter. I was like, well, where the fuck were you a few days ago?
Well, I've been known as your fucking mama. Is what I've been known as.
Do you realize what shit we had to do? I was looking for metahumans and you didn't. Oh no, sorry. No, I need to go and have a talk with you.
You're going to be on the customer service desk for the next 6 weeks at the Hall of Justice. That's what you've earned. I always like to acknowledge we have a philosopher in the audience tonight. We have the enlightenment can only be achieved without desire. Desiring enlightenment makes it impossible. Continuing the circle of nope. That is far too intelligent for my puny brain at this time.
All I know is that fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, and suffering leads to the dark side.
That is the Sith code, right?
That's the ABCs of how to be a Sith.
I think I would choose Sith. But that was the epilogue. It really was the weakest part of a film. While from a technical perspective or a film historian's perspective, which we kind of are, I found it interesting as an artifact of what because as you sort of said, it was going to be a saga of 2 or 3 or 4 films, depending who you listen to and when. It was an interesting exploration of what those films would have gone with. And I remember that the nightmare sequence in Batman and Superman confused the living fuck out of me. What is this? And what is it supposed to be? What are those flying things? Like, which I still think is a fundamental weakness of it. You can't plan a scene like that that confuses the fuck out of your audience. And wait 2 years, it'll make sense. But yeah, and another attempt. Another. So what am I trying to say?
This is a perfect fodder for DVD extra material, and it's like, yep, cool. That I'm glad that I was able to see that. The movie did not need it. It just didn't. Much like the overly extended war, where we see the old gods and the Atlanteans and the humans.
That was badass.
It was fucking badass. Yes, it was really cool, and it made. I thought that was a much better superhero clashing with CGI villains than what was presented in Endgame. Honestly, I thought it was cool. I didn't have any investment in any of the superheroes, but it just, from a visual perspective, it looked cool.
And again, I think they were planting seeds there.
So you got the seed of the Green Lantern in there.
A little ring going and taking off.
You got the old gods.
Like Zeus doing the lightning thing. He looked like Jerry Butler. It wasn't, but it looked like him. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I want to see more of that. Like, you know,
that's the old gods, and they're really cool characters that are intrinsic to the kind of combat with Darkseid and the anti-life equation.
It was a cool scene. You're right. It goes on, but that didn't worry me because I was enjoying it, and I'm like, this is way more. I think they covered similar territory in the theatrical cut, but it was
Steppenwolf and he was driven mad because he lost.
And it wasn't Darkseid, and it wasn't anywhere near as epic. And I kind of thought, in terms of epic battle scenes, that kind of did it well. I liked it.
Yeah, it was great. But I also don't think that if you cut that out and just had conversation of Diana just telling Bruce that, I don't think it would have been a huge disservice to the movie, and it would have just sped things up a little bit.
There you go. That is, I think, unless you've got anything else major Karakuri, and I only know of enlightenment from my over-reading. My personal mentality is much messier than that. Well, I mean, one's personal mentality can be, you can have aspirational goals in that space. That's fine. I was going to say, is there anything else, unless there's anything else you'd like to cover about, or any sort of major points that we think we've missed? I think it was a fascinating, from a historical perspective, as a film lover, as a superhero film lover. I'm glad it happened. I'd like to see more of it. Look, honestly, maybe if they released a David Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad, I'd watch the shit out of it, just because, how the fuck did this atrocity come about? Because that film is terrible.
And he hates that. He hates the theatrical cut. I wonder if this is going to kind of open up a little bit of that. Meanwhile, in Universe B,
it sort of set at the start. It just gives us a wonderful reference point to know when a director says the studio fucked with this. This is what that can look like. This is, in this case, 3/4 of what Snyder shot thrown away. So it gives us a wonderful reference point to look at the future. You sort of said it was sort of a cliche, an Alan Smithy film. The Fincher version of Alien 3, or what am I thinking? Supernova, I think. A really science fiction film from about 20 years ago. I think it was an Alan Smithy film, where the director is kicked out of the editing suite and the studio takes over. And this is a wonderful A-B example of what that can look like in reality. Now, we have apparently a few people still watching, and I still have you talking.
Yeah.
Do you have enough energy for Falcon versus Winter Soldier? Audience, do you have enough energy for Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Oh, I think that we should hold off, honestly, because still getting over me upset tummy and needing sleep. And there's a dog here that is quietly protesting that I haven't given him any his dinner yet.
Sleep. Hello, Archimedes. This is our third co-host, who you can see is contributing at a normal level, what you normally would for the show. So there you go. I think we'll hold over then.
Yes.
Falcon Winter Soldier. We will review episodes 1 and 2 next week.
Yes.
Along with Bright Young Things.
Yeah, I think I think they go hand in hand, those two topics.
1930s drama and a superhero film.
Yeah.
He needs more input and screen time. George or Archimedes? Archimedes, producers have really been cutting Archimedes material over there in King Lake.
Well, frankly, the problem is, and there's something. He's terribly racist.
Speaking of people who are in college, so you cover what we've got. We can cover a brief note though. We're not going to Falcon and Winter Soldier, but while we're dipping our toe into the Marvel universe, we did get an interesting announcement today that the long-awaited announcement around the next Marvel film has finally been made. We talked about it ad nauseum, but Black Widow will be landing on Disney Plus this July. Yeah,
and it feels like only last week Kevin Feige was kind of saying, nope, it's going to be cinema only. But no, it's going to be dual. But this is another one of those things. Disney are charging you $30 on top of your subscription to go and do this. So it's them going, oh, you want it at home? You're going to have to pay. Otherwise, you can pay less by going to the cinema and watching it.
I mean, you and I, being that we're in the privileged position of living in a country with zero COVID at the moment, touch wood, we can probably, I imagine it'll get a cinema release here about the same time, and we can go pick our cinema to go and see it in. We can go see it in a nice, big, fancy pants cinema, hopefully with no one sitting next to us. Queer weirdos like that. I don't like people sitting next to me.
I don't like people in my screens. My favorite birthday was going to see Kill Bill Volume 2, and I was in the cinema all on my own. It was wonderful.
Whereas, like, you and I had to go and see Endgame, and we're literally in the fucking front row. It sucks. Well, it was a good film, but yeah. But it's interesting. I think that it's interesting they're testing that model again.
Well, they did it with Mulan. Yeah, they did it with Mulan. They've done it with Raya and the Last Dragon, which is the new Disney animated movie. They didn't do it with Soul, Pixar's movie. They didn't do it with Onward, the other Pixar movie. And now they're doing it with Marvel. It's like, okay, they're only choosing the Disney, the in-house Disney stuff. So far, they haven't tried doing it with any of the 20th Century Fox stuff that they've purchased or any of the Pixar stuff that they own. It's only been Disney, which is odd.
The next Pixar film, Luca, will also be going straight to Disney Plus, but will not attract that premium fee. $30 is rich. I don't have Disney Plus for, the reasons I've talked about before. I have the others, and I'm not paying for another one. And if I did, with Netflix don't do this, right? If they had a new major IP release, and I wanted $30 extra on top of my subscription, I'd be like, you can go and fuck yourself, Netflix.
Yeah.
That you're basically telling me pirate this film by charging $30 extra.
Yeah. And Amazon do it, kind of, but Amazon subscription is infinitely cheaper than all of the other ones, and you get additional bonuses on Prime deals and things like that. But it's no more to get those than any other platform. You're not paying $30 to rent it.
It's outrageously expensive, and obviously that was the argument behind Feige at the time, and I guess others were like, well, we're going to be losing so much money if we release it straight to Disney Plus, blah blah blah.
I wonder if they've finally done it because more of the countries are now heavily reducing their COVID cases. Maybe not enough in America, but they're kind of going, we need to release it. We'll have to do it at a point where, to avoid piracy of this, it's cinema, and anywhere that isn't able to go to cinema, they can still get it. I wonder if that's their mentality.
It's going to be available straight away, right? Like, pirated, but we talked at nauseum as well, but China is such a huge market now for these films. Avatar was just recently re-released in China, and that prompted it to now go back to being the highest grossing film of all time, which it absolutely does not deserve to be. But what are we doing? So, if you get release of Black Widow in China, I don't think it involves any ghosts or anything. Probably not going to have any content that the Chinese government, I think, would find objectionable. So, if it gets a release in China, there's several $100 million, in your back pocket. Miss Foxy B is telling us that Binge is the worst one for their basic package, and they're shit quality unless you upgrade to. I think you're talking about the upgrading to the HD service. I think there, Miss Foxy. So.
I've got their Binge. That's where I was watching Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I've had no problems with it.
Is that the SD version or the HD version?
I can't remember. I think it's the HD version.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. I think if you have the SD version, the picture quality can be pretty shit out.
Really don't see why they are offering SD as an option anymore when it should be like 1080p HD as the basic, and then it's like 4K, 8K, and everything else above.
Money.
Yeah.
I like money. And as usual, we pay the Australia tax.
That's very true.
So we pay extra for everything because money. And Rupert Murdoch likes money. But that's an interesting argument. It's like maybe the Black Widow will get a release in places like China and Europe, probably not Europe, but China at least, and that could help the gross. And or they've just gone fuck it, right? I guess they're looking at it going, the US vaccination efforts aren't going to be at a point where they can have wide cinema reopenings and have the kind of cinematic release they would like would for a summer movie in the Northern Hemisphere anytime this year. So if they want to wait for a summer release, they're going to have to either put it on Disney or wait till next year. And wait until next year.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of it is they've waited so long and they've got these other movies, the Eternals and all of these other big cinema movies it's like, oh fuck, we really need to release these movies, or else it fucks with the storytelling timeline of phase 4.
Isn't it interesting that the American summer is the big movie release period? Like, isn't it the kind of like the time of year, like an Australian period? Like that's December, January, February, which is a dead zone for major cinematic release usually, because people like being outside in the summer. Not me, not us. I went outside once. The graphics sucked. So, like, where's that side? But like people apparently, I've heard, like the outdoors. So,
but there's a simple reason, Travis. Longest school holidays are in the summer months, and money.
I was going to say, but yeah, I mean, the money is the end goal, but I would have thought, like, it'd be easier to go out and you'd be more tempted to go out to an indoorsy activity in the winter. But Miss Foxy B makes a point. We can't leave without a snow issue. If you've snowed in, I guess, then maybe that makes it hard to go to the cinema. But anyway, I was excited about that. I'm excited to see Black Widow. We've been waiting now. It's been delayed by almost a year. So it'll be fascinating to see Marvel's first female-led superhero film since Elektra.
Ooh, shade being thrown.
I had to watch that film.
Actually, no, I'm saying the fact that you didn't mention Captain Marvel.
Oh, you forgot about that one. Yeah, that was probably a positive.
All right. Well, there is one other thing that I'm going to be talking about next week.
Sorry?
Another movie coming out in the cinema that I will be talking about next week. Godzilla vs. Kong.
They're coming out next week?
It's coming out this week.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's going to be playing at my local. I'm going to have to check it out.
Because I didn't particularly enjoy the first Godzilla, but Godzilla King of Monsters I really enjoyed, and Kong Skull Island I enjoyed. They're guilty pleasures of mine. Fuck you all for if you don't like them. And this, I think it could be fun.
I mean, I have absolutely. I mean, I didn't like Godzilla. I didn't like Skull Island. There's a very, very good chance I won't like this, but I'm going to try and find. I will try. I think this is more fun when we've both seen the thing. So I will try and find space in my very busy schedule to check it out.
Cool. All right. And so this week we reviewed our chain movie of the week, which was Night of the Generals. I recommended Travis watch Monster, the anime. We're going to be watching Bright Young Things next week. We had a big, deep dive into Justice League, Zack Snyder's version. Next week, we'll be talking Bright Young Things, Godzilla, and episode 1 and 2 of Falcon and Winter Soldier.
I forgot one. I'm going to leave people with one last complaint about Justice League that I completely forgot about, and I apologize. But they had J.K. Simmons in that film. They had J.K. Simmons available.
And that's all they did with him.
Commissioner Gordon, and I was like, maybe the Snyder Cut will have more than 2 scenes, which was 1 scene. So we got double the scenes. We got 2 scenes in the Snyder Cut with J.K. Simmons, but I'd say 5 minutes screen time. Fuck you. Don't cast J.K. Simmons if all you're going to give us is 5 minutes screen time.
I think that was again kind of legacy stuff where he was going to be a much more vital element of
the Batman.
Ben Affleck's. Yeah.
Anyway, I leave it there. So, if you like, we had a few people watching this week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are non-regular visitors. Enjoyed the chat between everybody in the chat. Love us on the Facebook, and I'm going to tell George right now, give him 30 seconds to paste the Facebook link in the chat so you can find us on the Facebook. It's going to be easier than me reading it out because I can't remember
Facebook.com
/ all the comms. Put it in the chat.
Facebook.com/armchair producers.
And you can find us on there and like us. We'll be here on Twitch and the YouTubes and the Facebooks most weeks about the same time. So 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Are we standard or are we daylight savings? I can't remember. Australian Melbourne time. Just look at Google Melbourne time.
Australia time.
Australian Melbourne time, because Australian time could be Perth. And they are 25 years behind Melbourne.
It's true. They've only just explored electricity.
It is, I think Elvis has just hit. So if you like us on the Facebook, follow us on either Twitch or YouTube, and you will probably get alerts and all that kind of bizzo about us going live. If there's something in particular you're curious about, like we do requests. We had a request a while ago to watch a movie, and he actually watched it and reviewed it. So if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about, drop it on one of those channels, and we will see if we can find it. Otherwise,
links are in the chat. I managed to do
all the links are over there, or there, depending on which way you're watching. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you to my glorious co-host in his very fashionable yellow shirt.
Available. You just message us and we'll get them sent out to you.
Facebook link is broken. No.
All right. It might be
Flight of the Dragons. There's a
Flight of Dragons is amazing. Hard to find though.
Is it? I feel like it's on DVD and stuff.
Is it? Because I remember trying to find it, and it was I had to find it through less than legal matters. But this was about 12 years ago, so
it can be purchased or rented from the YouTubes.
Goodness me! Oh, nope, I don't want Flight of the Conchords or Flight of the Navigator.
A little bit different.
Yeah.
Some dance floor. I don't know if that was in Flight of the Dragons. That would be an interesting crossover.
Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dicks.
All right. On that note,
someone's got to do that. If only I knew how to use video editing software, I would totally do that. Flight of the Dragons. There you go. I have heard of that. I am familiar. I don't think I've ever seen it.
It has got James Earl Jones' voice, and the opening monologue that he delivers, it is just amazing. It is his
Isn't that the film that kind of really birthed your love of animation?
No. Everything for my movies, whether it is live action or animation, it all comes from the first time my dad had me on his knee and he just started recording Castle in the Sky by Studio Ghibli. Yes.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
There you go. It's I don't know if I'm gonna have time, but I'm gonna because you asked for it, Cara Kitty, and I'm a man of my word, and George has already seen it. I'm gonna try and find Flight of the Dragon. I'm not gonna buy a DVD version.
Rent it.
Maybe I'll rent it, but I'm a student, so I'm on a limited
students,
fucking limited budget. So let me see what I can find, and if I can find it a copy at the right price, nothing. I will.
We're not
see if
shady.
I will see if I can watch it, and maybe we'll see you back here next week, Cara Kitty, and you find your way back here. We will hopefully have that to talk about along with Bright Young Things and
Falcon and Winter Soldier. Yeah, it looks like it's potentially going to be another big show next week. Thank you for sticking around for 2 hours. This has been another long show, but we had a 4-hour movie to talk about as well as a 2.5-hour movie to talk about. So I think we did well. But thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. Please remember to like, subscribe, share it out, and let people know that they too can watch 2 hours of inane babble. Until next time, good night.